Welcome to Be Growth Driven. I am ecstatic to have another episode here with a good dear friend of mine, Brian Galke. And there's this guy is one of the most unique guys, most unique set of skills you'll ever find. And once you learn these things, it's like the thing that you wish you would have known a long time ago. So I'm very excited to have a good friend of mine, Brian. This is a gentleman we've been friends for a very long time, many years, and we'll go into how we met and how we connected and why this is something that's helping people grow substantially in their personal, professional lives with what Brian's doing and what he wants to share or what he's got to share. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on my good friend, Brian Galke. Brian,
Hey,
so good to have you, man.
thank you for having me back. I'm excited.
I'm looking forward to it. And I alluded to this just a little bit as far as like how you and I met. You and I have been friends for a really long time.
Yep.
And it was an interesting connection of like how you and I connected. We met at a growth conference of Grant Cardone. It was
Correct.
GrowthCon 3, if I recall correctly, at the one at Marlin Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the second one I've gone to. I can't believe it. Like I just got back from one. And that was like my eighth one or eighth or whatever one I've been to. Yeah, eighth
Right.
one I've been to. And so it's like that was my second. Like we've been friends for a long time, but we met um, in the Centurion Lounge in Miami
Yes.
after this, and we just had a big old circle of a bunch of people, and that's how we connected.
Yep.
Like, what brought you there? Because I always find it interesting how paths collide in our
Sure.
journeys in business and life and those types of things. What brought you there?
Fluke circumstance. So it's kind of funny. Most of the things in my life that have kind of worked out have fallen that way, and it was a funny story. So at 42, I had a kid, and my wife wanted to go on a girls' trip. And she's like, listen, she's like, no offense, but you've never had a kid, and I have this maternal guilt, and I can't go on a trip with my girls with worry about my kid the whole time. Would you care if I asked my mom to come down and help you watch Viola? And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, I'm not going to sit and watch my mother-in-law watch my kid. I'm going to go somewhere too. And she was completely fine with that. So that was when 10X was in Vegas. And that was the first time I'd seen Grant's books. I didn't really know much about him, but I went to the one in Vegas, and it was fantastic. And so after that, I took my buddy Rich went with me. I called him up, like, hey, look, this thing just popped up. It's at the exact same time that GrowthCon's going on. I've read the book. Do you want to go? He's like, yeah. And I had such a good time at the one in Vegas that we signed up to go to the one in Marlin Stadium. And so we went to that one. We sat on the floor, which I'm thankful I did because the sound was much better down there than it was up
Right.
high. But the way you and I met was, they have a good community there. You can, no matter what you say or think about Grant, some people love him. He's a very polarizing person. His community is good and solid, like networking galore in a good way. And when we all went to the airport, everybody kept on their lanyards from the event. And that's how we ended up in the Centurion Lounge and bumped into you.
There you go. I
Yeah.
figure I remember that day because I'm like, you know what? I'm not done networking. Like for me, like that GrowthCon, like I look back at my journey and I'm always very transparent about it because I think it's important that we share the hard times we've been in as
Mhm.
entrepreneurs and how we made it through it because other people that are just starting out on their entrepreneur journey, they need to know that somebody's already walked the steps and made it.
Yes.
Right? It's kind of like seeing the flag at the top of the highest peak, right? You
Mhm.
you you got to know that that thing's been planted and that thing's mountable, right? So
Yes.
like that, I remember that GrowthCon because like for me, I'm such I I'm such I'm still an introvert,
Mhm.
right? People may say like, what? No way. But it's like I push myself, like I push myself to be extroverted because I know that that's where I gotta be for my team, and that's where I
Yes.
gotta be to get where I want to go or where I know I need to go. But like that event, I remember like I went there with like 1,000 business cards,
Yeah.
and my goal was to hand out all 1,000, right?
Mhm.
And I remember coming back like to the hotel like midway part of the day, and I called my wife Audrey, and I'm like, "There's no way I'm getting rid of 1,000 cards. There's no way." And she's like, "Don't you come back with a single card."
Yeah.
So so that's it lit the fire, and that's what actually, that's what brought me to at the end of that whole thing. I'm like, "All right, I'm not done. I don't have any
Right.
cards left, but I'm not done. I'm going to keep, and then I'm like, I went to the Centurion Lounge. I'm like, I'm going to go meet more people. I want to go find it. So, I think a lot of us had the same thing in mind.
Absolutely. It's a very energetic environment and event to go to. The people are excited to be there. People come from all over the world. You never know who you're going to be sitting next to. And the
Right.
speakers and the momentum that they keep going, like they end it with a concert, so,
Right.
it leaves on good terms. A lot of places are like, all right, thanks for coming out. Good night, curtains close. But the
Right.
way that they close out events keeps that momentum going. And that's probably, of all the events I've gone to, there's 2 or 3 that I keep in touch with, the people that I've gotten to know. And usually the ones that you do it with are more intensive, like small groups. You do a lot of group projects, and that's how you bond with those people. But at this event, it's such a good time that the people I've met, I still keep in contact with. And, we'll reach out and go, hey, are you going this year? Are you going this year? And unfortunately, I wasn't able to go this year. I had a speaking gig at the same time. But it's one of those that the same buddy I went with, gosh, if my would have been 7 years ago, we've talked about, let's go to the next one. But even though I couldn't go, I bought it on where I could watch from home.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and this year was amazing. They had over 160,000 virtual.
correct.
It was insane.
Yeah.
So, and next year supposedly is the last one. So make sure you get a live ticket.
I'll have to.
But so this is this just shares with everybody like how Brian and I met, and I think that's important because it kind of displays the importance of creating connections and communication and relationships, right?
100%.
And that links right into what you do to help professionals right now all around the world. And
Correct.
so I guess tell everybody that doesn't know who Brian Galke is. Who is Brian Galke? And what do you do?
Sure. So I'm a recovering employee. So I worked in corporate America for 21 and a half years. But I always secretly wanted to, back in 2012, I was on a date with a girl and she's like, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to get paid to travel the world and teach people something. And I finally got that opportunity. I started speaking in 2020 for free at a lot of different events. And then after I got dismissed from corporate America, I no longer had an excuse to hide. As a matter of fact, the reason the company's called Subtle Skills was because when I was speaking for free, I never wanted it to be a conflict of interest with my job. So I took vacation time and I did everything under Subtle Skills. So a year ago, if you would have Googled my name, it would have shown nothing but, or a year and a half ago, nothing but government documents when I was corporate America. And in 2023, I took on speaking full time and it absolutely changed my life. And people say, oh, well, are you a motivational speaker? No, I'm a tactical speaker. And what's really unique about it is I was trained by attorneys on how to understand other people based on facial features. And people go, oh, I love the show Lie to Me. And I'm like, so do I, but that's not what I teach. So it's resting facial features. So I love body language. Matter of fact, you can see in the background here, I keep Janine Driver's book. Down below that, I've got Joe Navarro, What Everybody is Saying. Of course, everybody's got to read Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference. So I'm a huge fan of that. But what was really unique about this skill, it was the first proactive skill that I was ever introduced to, meaning I could go and look up people before I met with them. So I felt more comfortable meeting with them. And in this day and age where this device connects us to the world but disconnects us from each other, it's more important than ever to figure out, how do I get in front of someone? How do I get that face-to-face contact? And more importantly, how do I make it about us instead of me?
Right. And I love it. What you've taught me, like now, I mean, now I feel like, or like some people that I talk to, they're like, oh my goodness, how did you know that? It's like I'm some, psychic reader, like I'm reading their palm or something like that, which I don't, anyway. But it's always interesting, when you can start to nail people on the dot, like how they think with just, I mean, and you're just a pro at it. And so I always go for eye angle, brows, and like nose.
See, and that's perfect, because when you're doing those 3, you're still looking in this general area and people know he's actually focused on me. And that's why I mentioned before, I love body language. Don't get me wrong. I've got books and books on it, but you have to wait for someone to move before you can figure out how to talk to them. And this is more like when I used to be an obnoxious traveler. When I went to other countries, I thought, oh, well, they should speak English. And if they don't, I'll speak English louder, right? Like that doesn't work well. But when I know I'm going to another country now, I learn basic phrases before I show up so I can communicate with the person. Well, I can do the exact same thing and teach students how to do this, where they go look up somebody and figure out how do they take in information, how do they process information, and more importantly, how do we differ in how we do those things so that I can learn to speak their language? Are they auditory? Are they visual? Do they make decisions fast? Do they make decisions slow? And that's not a sign of intelligence, it's preference. And
Right.
all these things are visible on people's faces.
And this really kind of gets us into like one of the first areas I think that's important to cover of like how do we create better connections, right, in sales and business
100%.
and and personal relationships too. It's
Hmm.
like, for those of out there that are looking for somebody, it's like, we all can put on a pretense for a little while, but there's some things just in that resting state that you can't hide.
Exactly. And the cool thing, look, if anybody's wanting to build relationships, we already know about ourselves. But they always say, who was it? Zig Ziglar said, if you want other people to be, was it? You have to be more interested in other people than you are yourself. I just screwed up that line, but you know what I'm saying. Like, if
Yeah.
you want people to be interested, you have to be more interested in them. And that's the whole thing. I know about my life, but if I'm going to meet with you, a good person should go check out your social media, Google your name. Like it amazes me how many people will show up to a client and go, or let me give you a better example. People will DM me all the time. Oh, I love your social media and everything. What do you do? I'm like, oh, thank you, spam canned email. At
Yeah.
least take the time to personalize the approach. And that's what people can do is you can look at people's facial features and figure out, how do I speak their language instead of pushing my own agenda? Can I show a few
Right.
screens as an
Yeah.
example?
Yeah,
All right.
100%. Yeah,
Because
I
it
think the phrase kinda that you were sharing was like, "Be interested before you're interesting."
yes, that
Is it
there you
kinda
go.
like that?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember that because it's like, we all want someone to be interested in us,
yes,
and we're selfish that way, every single one of us. But yeah,
we are.
go ahead. Let's see here. Let's
All
do that.
right. So you can
There
see
we
that.
go.
So it's ironic. That's why I wanted to show this screen is that this is one of the early on slides in my keynotes is if we're like the person on the left, we're making it more about us. So if you notice that you see that his hand is clear and everybody else is blurred out, that's what
Yeah,
most people are like. They show up. I know what I want to say, and the phrase is show up and throw up. Oh, I've got the best product. And if you just keep talking about yourself, people know you're making it about you. And so we mentally turn off. So if you look at the background with the people who are blurred out, they're all on their phones, they're checking their watches, they're drinking coffee. However, when you stop and you make it about the person you're talking to and is it a good fit and trying to speak their language, then you look like the people on the right, which is when you give people your time and attention, they give you theirs back out of respect. And that's the biggest thing that a lot of people lose is we get so excited or we get dependent. I need this sale. And then we become needy, and neediness is a repellent. And another term for neediness in business is commission breath. People can tell when you're just trying to push your product versus figure out, is it the right product for them? And it can be a product, a service, you name it. But that's what we get into. And, you know, it's very interesting because we accidentally do that in our personal lives as well. When we get so excited about something, we go and we kind of push what we want to do. But if you really want happiness in all areas of life, it's about connection and then communication. Then you get the desired results.
right. You got to pay the price
Right.
to get the payoff, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of along those lines. So I like this. This is good, and
Yeah.
because it's a good reminder to anybody that's trying to get ahead. What are you doing?
That's just it. We can easily identify in our personal life if somebody makes it about them and we're like, oh, well, you're a narcissist. Right? It's easy to see somebody who does it, but we don't realize we do it accidentally because we're so excited. And sometimes it's legitimately because we know our product can help them, but we're more focused on the product and not helping them understand why it's a good product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a thought came to my mind too. It's like whatever we see in other people, the
Hmm.
reality is we're seeing what we already have in ourselves.
Absolutely.
So if we see somebody as a narcissist, well, there's probably a little bit of narcissism in ourselves that we got to work out. So
Absolutely. Well, and I'll challenge that. It's kind of like jealousy. So jealousy comes from one of three things. Either you're a cheater, number two, you've been cheated on, or number three, you found something you're so worried about losing that you're jealous over it and you're going to end up losing it because of your jealousy, right? But it's kind of those things. So it's either projecting what you've done or what you've gone through. And that's one of the things that's actually in a lot of books is every communication you have to learn to get rid of the biases that are in your head in order to have a good clean communication with that person now instead of reliving your past in your present moment.
right. Oh, there we go. That's a little bit better.
Yeah.
Uh, no, that is. Man, that is so true. Because these are, I mean, when how like learning how to like read this, see this, and then we put ourselves into those situations.
Hmm.
Like, how much of an impact have you seen that make for some people as far as like the relationships they're building now versus they were before?
So it all depends on the person, but what this really helps is introverts, because introverts live in the prison of their own mind in the present moment. So you can be surrounded by thousands and feel isolated and alone because you're
Right.
stuck in your head. And this is why it was such a big game changer for me, because I'm an introverted extrovert. I love to be around people, but I would go to events and not talk to a single soul because I was thinking in my head, oh, they don't want to talk to me, or oh, what am I going to say? I'm going to screw it up. But when I learned to focus on you, I'm not thinking about me. And a great book on that subject is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's a very tough read in the beginning because it was his experiences of day to day going to a concentration camp and the things he saw. But then the second half is the philosophy that he learned out of that. And this Cliff Notes version of that is the people who went through those atrocious situations, the ones who said, I want to see my wife again, my husband again, my kids again, were able to survive those inhumane conditions. But if somebody said, oh, I'm just going to make it for me, they tended to perish. So there is something instilled in us in a deep level that we can always do more when we make it about more than us.
I love that. So it's kind of like it's the push to, well, it's the push to dig, have a bigger purpose of why you are doing it. It's
Absolutely.
finding your purpose, so to speak,
Hmm. Yes.
right? Interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it's like Zig Ziglar always says, and I don't know why I'm quoting him so much today. I never usually do. He said, when people show up, I can't impact their life, but if they bought my courses, then I can help them later on. And that's why I love, don't get me wrong, sometimes we need the motivational speaker, like somebody who tells us their story. But
Right.
I really love the people who give us tips and tools to help improve my life. So and a lot of conferences are getting good about doing that mix now, where it is, show me somebody who's done something that's possible that I would have previously thought was impossible, but you have to tell me how they did it. Like if somebody just gets up and goes, oh, I made $1 million today. Okay, that's cool. And then it says, okay, $1 million a day is possible, but how did you do it? And
Right.
that's what I like is, what are tactical things that we can do? Like you and I've got on calls, and you could say, why do this? But instead you break down this is the reason why you go in. Like I watched the video you did for Connect 360 the other day on why was it the DX settings for email?
Yeah. The DNS settings. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the whole thing. You just could have gone on and go, I know how to make email work. Instead, you went through, this is the breakdown of why these particular settings have this particular effect. That's what we need more of this day and age. And so that's, how do I get my email to be received by someone? I teach something on a different level, and that's, how is my message received by someone, because of I'm making those little changes to my presentation for the person I'm talking to.
Right. I've heard it described like another way of like you sell the future versus the features.
Hmm.
So it's like,
Right.
when you're talking to somebody and you know that they want this later down outcome, it's like if you're trying to, if you have a product or service you're like, I know they can benefit from,
Hmm.
you gotta present it as not, hey, this is this shiny thing and it has a knob here and does this. It's like
Yeah.
you gotta do this. However, each people are gonna process it, different people are gonna process that information differently. And so that's
Right.
where it comes back to like what you're doing. How have you integrated that into like sales training or those types of things?
Sure. So you name the industry, and it's funny because they always say, have your ideal avatar. And they're always like, well, it can't be everyone. Well, mine kind of does. So, because everyone's got a face. I've spoken to law enforcement, I've talked to superintendents of schools, automotive, real estate. I've even taught other attorneys. Matter of fact, I'm going to be speaking at the largest DWI attorney conference next year in January. So, it's all kinds of industries. Most recently, I was at, it's called BOMA, which is the Building Office Management Association, which is people who manage corporate
Mhm.
housing and, large environments. So office spaces, apartments, you name it. And the reason why it's applicable to everyone is everybody wants to build better relationships with everyone else. And right
Right.
now, we've gone through that period of, some people have, spent almost 2 years in their house. And even if they haven't, more meetings are happening like this over Zoom.
Right.
Well, I can't tell your body language. Are your arms crossed or legs crossed? I don't even know if you're wearing pants. You might be in workout
Well,
shorts down below. And we would never know it because you see the people, they're all dressed up from the top up.
Right.
But a lot of the skills that I learned in sales have gone out the window with going to meetings like this, video conference calls, Zoom, StreamYard, you name it. That took away a lot of the skills. So, for example, now let's use my background versus yours. One of the first books I ever got was How to Win Friends and Influence People. Great book.
Love that book.
But yeah, but on you, there's nothing in your background that I can see, right? Because it's your logo. Now in mine, you could go, oh, well, tell me about this book. Tell me about why is Batman there? Tell me about this book. But
so I need to get books, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying it for other people, they don't know what to talk about, right? And that's the first book that I was taught. And then I learned body language. After those two, that's when I learned how to decode people's facial features. And that's what changed it for me, was because I can see your face or I can look you up ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were to like translate that, so really it's like, I think a lot of people are familiar with like that Dale Carnegie, methodology of you're kind of mimicking and taking an interest there. And, that's pretty standard, to create relationships. But like, if you were to give those that are watching, like some simple strategies that they could implement to help improve their communication, what would you tell them? Since what we're basically bringing it all back down to is you got this face that's always there,
right?
That you can actually help out. So let me know when you got the right slide, and I'll pop this.
Yeah, I'm gonna slide to. We're gonna start off with right here. So I mentioned earlier the thing that really stuck with me, and look, for anybody who's listening who's skeptical, so was I. When I met the guy that taught this to me, he was an attorney who learned it for jury consulting. He ended up leaving his law practice to teach this around the world. But because I'd never heard of it, I thought this guy's full of crap. And so I got invited by a friend who we were supposed to go to dinner, and she wanted to change the plans, go meet Mac. And I thought, I'm going to prove that this guy's a fraud. So if anybody who's thinking you're skeptical, I like skeptical people. I just like curious skeptics because I want them to do their own research. Right. But what really changed it for me was, unlike micro expressions, statement analysis, body language, this is a proactive skill. And so I could go and look up somebody on LinkedIn, and then I could find a picture of them. And from after LinkedIn, I'd go to social media, and I'll explain that in a second. But like one of my speaking coaches, you may know, Steve Sims. Well, every single one of these features that you can see tells me something about Steve. And so, for example, high ears, low eyebrows, rounded forehead, each one of those tells me, how do I need to present the information to Steve? And then I can go and look people up on, the reason I go to social media after that is because LinkedIn, you don't know how old is the photo. It's been touched up, so you can't necessarily see things. I say that if they've had a professional headshot, then it's usually touched up. And the most important part is sometimes the photographer will invert the images, and I want to know which side I'm looking at for a very, very good reason. But in addition to all these things, then I start on LinkedIn, then I go to social media, and I find a more recent picture. Why more recent? Because our faces are made up of so many different muscles that they're constantly changing over time. So pardon the image for a minute, but this is what we look like underneath our skin. And so what happens is there's 43 muscles in the face. The mind creates movement, movement creates muscle. And so our faces are constantly changing over time. So I want the most recent picture because over, let's say your LinkedIn picture is 5 years old, a lot can go on in your life in 5 years. And our faces are constantly changing. And so nobody ever wants to look me in the eye anymore. So what I do is I always show a picture of me at 18 versus 38. So if you look at the three arrows there, my ears used to stick out more away from my head. The second one, my eyebrows, you can see they're angled right now. They were straight when I was a young kid. But over time, when I became a corporate trainer, they became angled. And we'll explain that here in just a second. And then the last one is my eyes used to angle down a lot more when I was a kid. And so that is people who worry about the downside of things. So all these things are constantly going on in our face. So it's not an instantaneous change to our face, but it's a change over time that takes place. And really what happens beyond that is when you're talking to someone, who would you rather talk to? Somebody who's looking you in the face or somebody who's looking at your body language the entire time? So all these things play a factor in just trying to figure out who am I talking to. So I'm going to, like, let's say I'm coming to meet you. I'm going to check out your website. I'm going to Google your name. I'm going to look for podcasts you were on. This is just another avenue to say, what else can I learn about Joel?
Right. So I'm kind of looking at myself right now. I kind of look on the downside, don't I?
Yeah. So you worry about the downside thing. So that means if I'm pitching you a service, I don't come in and say, oh, we're just the best in the industry, and you should go with us. These are the features, the benefits. We'll say, I would actually go the opposite side. I know a concern that comes up quite a bit with this type of service is X. So, for example, I just spoke at Door to Door Con in January, and in that one, there's a lot of people who do solar panels. So I asked them, okay, well, give me an example. They're like, okay, tell us if somebody's got downward angled eyes. I said, okay, well, I know for a fact from talking to roofers and solar panel people that the number one concern they run into is when somebody gets solar panels on, that they're going to damage their roof. So if I'm talking to someone, I'm a salesperson, and their eyes angled down, they're worried about the downside of things. So I'm going to say, while we're talking about, hey, we're here, I sell XYZ solar panels. And when they start moving towards things, I'm going to say, I know one of the biggest concerns we've heard from our customers is damaging the roofs when we're there. Our installers go through a specialized training to ensure the integrity of the roof stays in place after our solar panels are up. So it's not a negative Nancy thing. It's letting people know I'm not just a salesman who's only going to tell you the upside of things. If I see that their eyes are angled down, you're worried about the downside of things. So I'm going to talk about this is how your bases are covered. And then I can move to why our features and benefits make us the best.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it helps you to be frankly more adaptable to each environment, because you're going to be able to now that you're aware of those things, you can jump from one conversation to the next
Mm-hmm.
and just simply make that quick adaptation.
Absolutely.
Off of a quick feature. That's it.
Well, so Door to Door Con is people who knock on doors. They have seconds when somebody answers the door to figure out, what do I need to change about my script? So we get a lot of hell. Ed and I have a podcast, and we're talking about the value of having a script when you first start. People are like, oh, I don't need scripts. I go off the fly. Nobody goes off the fly when you're first learning things. However, once you've learned the material, then you can adapt things over time. It's kind of like when you learn to drive a car, you first have to learn by the book, what are each step, turn on the ignition, put your foot on the brake, all these things. Now, once you get comfortable with driving, so what is it? You go from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. So there's 4 steps of learning anything. Unconscious incompetence, I don't even know what I don't know. Then there's conscious incompetence. Oh, I realize I don't know how to do something. Then there's conscious competence, which is I can do it, but I have to think about it every time. And then the 4th and final one is unconscious competence, which is now when you drove to work, you didn't have to think about every single step while you're doing it. But you've had to learn that first one by memorizing a script and things of that nature. Well, that's what I love is you can have your script, and it does not matter what product you have, but then you're just going to learn to tailor it to the person who answers the door, or you cold call. People go, well, I email the person. That's fine.
Right.
If it's not a cold call and you know who you're going to email, I'll change the language in my email to, are they auditory, visual, or kinesthetic? So I will literally go and look at their face and go, okay, do they look like they have larger ears and smaller eyes? Does it look like they have larger eyes, smaller ears? And you're not comparing directly from ear to eye. You're saying for the size of their face, do their ears look large or small? Do their eyes look large or small? And then I'll adapt it. So if it's a visual person, I'll literally, sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'll say, can you see where I'm coming from? Picture this, visualize that. Why? Those are all visual based words. If the person looks more auditory, then you can say things like, does it sound like a good idea? Do you hear where I'm coming from? Listen to this. And if you don't know who it's going to go to, then I add in all 3. So for example, I used to answer government RFPs, which is a request for proposal that was anywhere from 100 to 400 pages. And we had amazing RFP writers, but I would also go back in and add in those different terms so that I can make sure no matter who's reading that RFP, we're speaking their language.
I love it. It's the subtleness to make it. You're communicating in a way that now that person feels more connected, whether it's on the written page or the verbal, right?
Yes.
And I like the knowing the whole script thing. It's like you got to know your script, but you got to know it well enough that you can adapt and speak extemporaneously.
Exactly.
When you're communicating with people, so that way, like I've tried to be very conscious, for example, of like when someone says, "Well, what do you do?"
Mm-hmm.
I know I got to adapt it quick because I'm going to lose them.
Yes.
If I don't say the right thing, and that's just the nature of communication. Like if our desire is to grow our business, grow relationships, it's like we got to figure out this communication thing if we suck at it.
Yes.
You know?
we all have the golden turd, which we think something's amazing, and somebody else looks at it and goes, no, no, that's a turd.
Yeah.
You need to get rid of that product. And that's why we need outside input. And the other part is it's just a matter of, I know what I want to say, but how would you best understand it? That's a totally different mindset of when you do things. So I gave the example earlier when I used to travel and I thought, oh, well, everyone should speak English. I had horrible travel experiences. But when I learned basic phrases of where I was going, that was me attempting to speak their language, so they
Yeah.
attempted to speak mine. And that's a game changer. Going in and demanding that you do things my way, again, that's kind of narcissistic. And we accidentally do that because we were taught the golden rule, which is, treat others the way you want to be treated, but that's not how people want to be treated. It's a great theory and concept of saying, hey, would I want to be treated that way? And that usually means be nice and friendly to people. But
Right.
really, you have to go a step beyond that and say, not just a level I want to be treated at, but how do they want to be treated just a little bit differently?
Right. I got a good friend of mine. I like what you said there and share there. I got a good friend of mine. He's a professional basketball coach,
Mhm.
like NBA. He was a coach for the Washington Wizards, that type of stuff. But one of the things that he does unique with all of his team members, because they're from around the world,
Mhm.
is he learns how to say hello to them in their language. Right?
Absolutely.
He has not only does he learn how to say hello in their language, right? But then he has a unique handshake with each one of them.
Mhm.
So it's creating the connections there. And that connects again directly to like what you're sharing with people on knowing how to communicate based upon things, knowing how to communicate. If you can't get past the front door, you're never going to learn how to communicate. So this allows somebody to get past the front door
Absolutely.
right
And how you
there.
yeah. Well, and let's take the opposite side of that. How do you keep employees? So in a recent SHRM study, the cost of a $60,000 a year employee leaving you costs you between 30 and 45,000 to recruit a new person, but it costs the business up to 120,000 because now you have to pull another person off to help the current person. And so then you start thinking, okay, well, what about employee retention? How do I make people feel seen and heard in the work environment as well? And so, for
Right.
example, one of the, I don't think I have a slide for it, so I'll just point at my own face. If there's a line below the lip and above the chin, it's called the verbal affirmation line that's
Okay.
right here. If you see that on someone, if you've ever read the book, The Five Love Languages, it's words of affirmation is what makes that person happy. So a sincere verbal compliment that's not just a hey, thank you for this. I really appreciate what you did on this certain thing goes more than title and pay for some people. And then so it's just a way of looking at people. And like, for example, if somebody is auditory, so they have larger ears and smaller eyes, then I would call them and thank them for something. If they're more visual, I would put it on a certificate or an email and print it because they want to see things that are
Right.
done. But if they've got that verbal affirmation line, there was a guy I used to work with, and he did an incredible job on something, and I wanted to send in a kudos and get him a bonus. And then somebody said, well, he's not really a money motivated person. I looked, and sure enough, he had that line right there. And so what we did is send an email to the EVP and the CEO about what a great job he did. And so then it came through that third party kudos. Now, a third party kudos, regardless of who you are, we love to hear that somebody else talked good about us to someone else.
Right.
But to somebody who's got that line, it's even more important because verbal affirmation is what fills their bucket.
Now I'm
So,
I'm gonna be looking for that now, like, on
oh yeah,
everybody. Like, I got mine hidden a little bit. How do you do it with a guy with a beard?
it's harder to see on when it's people like that. I've got it because I just did it for another training group. So we'll see if I can find that presentation, pop up a picture of it. Who did I do that with? Oh, I did it for a law enforcement group because they were talking about officer retention. So let me find that one. But while we're talking,
Yeah. No, I love that though, because I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing that, you wanna figure out, like, well, the love languages, right?
yes,
That somebody has. And a lot of times we don't think of that in the professional setting. Like, we talked about it actually here at First Direct because I'm like, I wanna know what Brianna's love language is, or what Jenna's is, or Chelsea's is, or Audrey's is, or Nathan's is, or so
hmm
on and so forth. Like, because I want to be able to know how to fill those buckets up, especially as the owner of the company.
right.
Not for a false reason, because I truly am appreciative of what they do.
Well, again,
However,
It's trying to speak their language. What makes you happy may not make them happy.
Right. Right.
So this is an example of the verbal affirmation lines.
Right.
So words of affirmation are more important than title or pay. And people go, oh, well, that's only on women. No, and that's here's the thing. When you get started, first, when you tell people this, they're all going to assume BS. Don't worry, I did the same thing. And then, oh, well, you won't see this on men or women or this culture or this gender. And I'm like, actually, no, if you look, we're all individuals, regardless of the color of our skin, where we were raised, left-handed versus right-handed, men versus women. We all have individual features on our face. So there can be a combination of up to 150 different features that are unique to us. Even identical twins raised in the same household, went to the same, raised by the same parents, same genetic code, but they had different life experiences. And you'll see little subtle changes in their faces based upon that.
And this is a game changer, I think, for a lot of people watching. It's there's so much value in that.
Yeah. So this was one of the other ones you and I have talked about. So we talk about faces all the time because I'm always known as the eyebrow guy. They can go and download the cheat sheet and see eyebrows. So we'll show something a little bit different today. Is when you look at someone, we say the phrase "keep a stiff upper lip" when we want someone to be stoic, right? Don't get too personal with that person, or stop sharing what you're going through in your personal life. That's based on when people have a flatter upper lip. So our upper lip's our personal lip, our lower lip's the professional lip. So when people have a thinner upper lip, like the first two people do, then don't ask a lot of personal questions, but keep the conversation going. Now, once they share personal information, then they're saying, okay, you can now ask me other questions. But if you go up to someone who has a flatter upper lip and ask them personal questions up front, they're going to put up that big guard because they don't feel like you deserve to know that about them. So we both know Janine Driver. She will get up on stage, she will share, she will overshare. But when she gets off stage, if you ask her personal questions, she'll take a step back and say, why do you need to know that? However, once she starts sharing in a conversation, personal things, you can ask questions based on that input. So are you familiar with mirroring and matching?
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, if somebody has a flatter upper lip, it's like mirroring and matching, where I wait and I'll talk about my personal life, no problem, but I'll ask them professional stuff. But when they decide to share, that's like them mirroring or matching me. They're saying now it's okay to have that conversation.
They open up, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
But until then, I'll keep it strictly business until they feel like sharing that information. So a great example is, people ask all the time, because the way I end my conferences is I invite volunteers up so we can show it on live people. Why? Because I want it to be repetition for the audience members who are getting trained. What do they see? So I'll ask them, all right, what do you see on this person? What do you see? But then I'll talk about the other features that we didn't cover. But if somebody tries to volunteer somebody who has a flatter upper lip, I know that person's going to disagree, and I'll actually write it down on a piece of paper that says, this person will disagree with everything I say. Now, on the opposite side, if somebody with the flatter upper lip volunteers, I'll actually call that out and I'll say, I know you are way out of your comfort zone with this based on your upper lip. Thank you for being a volunteer. And they'll acknowledge it. So it's those little things about people. You can just know, like, let's say the dating world. And I know you're not in the dating world, but for your audience members, just how can this apply everywhere? Well, if somebody has a flatter upper lip and you're going on a first date, don't expect them to share a lot of personal stories about themselves. They'll talk about work and external things, but people who have that flatter upper lip feel like you have to earn it over time. Now, what's really interesting is people go, well, it's the way you're born, it's genetics. No. Every communist or former communist country I've been to, they have a lot of flatter upper lips. Why? If you had a personal opinion, you were killed. You could not speak in public about things. So if you know anything about body language, lip suppression is when you do this. Well, if you do that over time, you can literally flatten your lips out. Now, on the total opposite side of that, the number one plastic surgery right now in the world is lip enhancement. And what's the main lip that they enhance is the top one. And then they also create that Cupid's bow. So I follow a lot of people on Instagram who are lip injection specialists, because I don't want to prove, I'm like, hey, go look at this. But you'll see people will come in, and when you have a larger lip, it's kind of that affect thing. Well, you're going to create an upper lip because you want to be more approachable, and suddenly people approach you more because you feel more confident at the same time. So plastic surgery is just the modern version of makeup for women, because for centuries, women have used makeup to highlight different parts of their faces. Now you can just go have plastic surgery done and you don't have to apply the makeup. So if you look at really older ladies, like late 70s, early 80s, they'll draw with lipstick larger lips than they actually have when you get up close to their face.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why.
interesting. You know, and I guess some guys do too. I don't
Mhm.
know. Probably some guys.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So now, what's the third set of pictures over there?
That's so the third one is whenever somebody is going to, what are the ways to enhance your lips? I always recommend that guys trim their mustache so that we
Okay.
can see their upper lip. Doesn't matter if you have one or not. If we can't see it, we automatically stay back a little bit. And
Right.
then for
You
women,
know,
highlight, especially if you have that Cupid's bow, when you're giving a presentation, highlight that Cupid's bow or wear lipstick to draw attention to your lips.
that little dip right here is what you're talking about,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
What
Absolutely.
is that Cupid's bow?
That's a Cupid's bow. That's exactly what it is. And if you look at, and for people who are listening, go on Instagram and type in, lip enhancement or lip injector. Look, and they create that Cupid's bow that didn't exist before in other people. I'm trying to think. I don't know if I have a slide for that one or not. I don't think I do, but I'll show you.
Isn't that connected to like more creativity as well?
That part I don't know, but it's definitely if the wider area. So that if their Cupid's bow is very wide, that's considered the libido line. That's somebody who's physically active, demonstrative. That's how they like to do things, hands-on learner. So, AKA kinesthetic learner. So you mentioned the
Okay.
5 love languages before. 3 of the 5 love languages are visible on somebody's face. So the first one is the fuller their eyelids are, that's time and attention. So
Okay.
I was raised in the day and age of Dr. Seuss. So the more lid you see, the more they think in terms of we. So I know if somebody's got very full eyelids, I need to ask him when I'm going to go run an errand. I don't have a lot of eyelid. So I'm always like, all right, I'm going to go do this. If I'm seeing someone who has fuller eyelids, then I need to invite them to go with me. And when I'm saying seeing, it could be coworkers, it could be friends, it could be whatever. But if I see that they've got a fuller lid, I should invite them to go with me because they want to go, but they won't always ask to go along with you. And so I get hired out by corporations to do purely entertainment, not teaching it. So, but hired to come out like to a president's club, something like that. And it's kind of fun for everyone. And when couples come up, I'll say, all right, do you guys want to know what you have in common or what's different? And they always pick what's different. And I'll bring up things like that, like who has the fuller upper eyelid and who doesn't. And then I'll just say, now the way it works on it is if you're the person who has the fuller upper eyelid, then you need to know that when they go and do things without you, it's not a reflection on you. If they don't have a lot of upper eyelid, they're just used to doing things by themselves. And I
Right.
tell the guy with the flatter upper eyelid or the girl with the flatter upper eyelid, hey, I know you like to do a lot of things by yourself, but when you see that fuller upper lid, just remember to invite them occasionally. And that's how you create, a win-win situation with people. So that's the time and attention. This area here is the physical touch. So the wider the libido line is, the more physical touch. So I'll say
Okay.
like, even if you're not dating them, if you go to give somebody a handshake, I'll do the double handshake if they've got that wide libido line. And then the other one that we talked about before is that verbal affirmation line. So words of affirmation, if that's their love language, you'll see that on their face. So 3 of the 5 love languages are
Wow.
literally written on someone's face.
Wow. That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
just like, and I've known you for a while. We continually have these conversations, and every time, like I learn something new. I'm like,
Yeah.
now I'm gonna look for that little Cupid's bow and
Uh-huh.
all that type of stuff, and that teaches a lot.
Well, I get labeled as the eyebrow guy. Like even so, Bradley the other day, he's like, "Hey,
Yeah.
you want to do the class? You want to do eyebrows again?" I'm like, "Brad, I do more than eyebrows." But the reason I teach eyebrows are you can see eyebrows from across the room,
Yep.
and eyebrows lead to eye contact. And that's the thing is this day and age, eye contact has been lost by so many people because of smartwatches, smartphones, you name it, that we have to learn to give
Right.
people that eye contact again. And if you're nervous, just look at their eyebrows and go, are they high or are they low? What
Right.
shape are they? And we can do another episode on just eyebrows. But
Yeah.
I do want to show 2 slides real fast. Let me make
Yeah.
sure. Okay.
Let's flip that back on there. There you
Yeah.
go.
All right. So this is, I go out and I Google people without eyebrows. And this is like what typically shows up on Google. And it's people that you've recognized for a very long time, but one feature's gone and we don't recognize them. And people go, oh, okay. And I'm like, all right, I realize that this is a disturbing
Wow.
image. So now
Yeah.
we'll go when people draw eyebrows on babies.
Right.
And how differently do we see the baby? So, like the one in the middle where the baby's laughing, it looks like an evil villain. And all they did was draw eyebrows on it. So we pay more attention to eyebrows than we think we do. And one last picture is who would you rather talk to? The only feature that's different there is we took away her eyebrow.
Yeah.
So,
That's a little disturbing.
yeah, there's a really good book right now. I just finished reading it. So I read all kinds of books. So this one is called The Like Switch. And so the light switch is a book about FBI profilers. So in this book, the guy who wrote it used to be in the behavioral analysis unit, and it was how does he teach agents how to recruit people to spy against their own country? And so the first thing that they tell agents to do when they walk into a room is to walk into a room, raise your eyebrows up like, hey, how are you? Tilt your head and smile. And that's seen as friendly. If I walk into a room and I don't have my glasses on and I'm scowling, that's seen as foe. So they teach agents when they walk through the door, tilt their head, raise their eyebrows up and smile. And that's how you're not seen as a threat as soon as you walk in the door. Well, where's the first thing that we look? Eyebrows.
Yeah.
So no matter if you're talking body language, you're talking here in this book, eyebrows play a huge factor, more so than we realize. And that's why a lot of young girls, if they don't feel in control of their body, they do one of two things. They will go get a tattoo showing ownership of my own body, or they'll shave off their eyebrows and draw angled eyebrows on, because angled eyebrows are seen as authoritarian. So I'll explain that a little bit more here. Let me show a picture. There's 3 basic shapes of eyebrows when we're talking to people. So the first one is straight eyebrows, then angled eyebrows, then rounded eyebrows. So straight eyebrows get straight to the point. Facts, figures, data. I didn't mention on this one, but we're taught by every book we've ever read, every movie we've ever seen, TV show. So like Spock here, what do they do with his eyebrows? They made them straight.
Right.
So you start realizing we're taught about faces all the time. We're just not formally taught. Now, here's a crazy fact. Physiognomy, which is what this is based on, was part of the academic system until Henry VIII said, I don't like the idea that beggars and vagabonds would use this against their fellow man. And he yanked it out of the education system. Now, it is known as a pseudoscience because, number one, it's not a science, but neither is body language, statement analysis, or anything, because it's not 100% repeatable in the 5 metrics of the scientific method. That doesn't mean it's not applicable. So it's not 100%. I've been using it for 14 years. It's in the high 90s. So sorry, that's my little rant. So straight eyebrows, straight to the point, facts, figures, data. Then you've got angled eyebrows like I have. You just think, what's my angle? Help me understand it first so then I can help other people. And so when you're talking to somebody, so let's say I'm selling something to you, I would explain why once you learn this, then your coworkers would benefit. Now, the opposite of that is if you had rounded eyebrows, like here, you think about the people around you first and yourself second. So I would talk about how your coworkers benefit first, then I would bring it back to you. So learning just by the 3 types of eyebrows is how do people think and process information. So straight eyebrows get straight to the point. Angled eyebrows, what's their angle? Help them understand it first, then they can help others. Rounded eyebrows, they think about the people around them first and themselves second.
Right.
So I'm still pitching the same product, but how I talk to you is based on what your face tells me about you.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
This stuff is just fascinating. Well, and like during COVID, like really all you can see is mainly their eyebrows.
Yeah.
And their eyes.
And people, because you and I met on Clubhouse, I think we're both on Clubhouse during COVID, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were on just during COVID and we were on Clubhouse, the only way I could look up people's faces was it connected to their Instagram. So we would get on Clubhouse. Somebody would volunteer, would bring them up on stage. I go, okay, give me your Instagram handle. And then I would go and look people up and say, okay, here's all the things I could say. And they're like, how do you know that? I'm like, this is what your face is telling me. So I say so too much. The people always say, oh, you're just gaslighting people. You're only telling them positive things. I'm like, show me a picture of somebody. I know it works because I did it for 6 months during COVID when we couldn't go anywhere. That was the only way I was analyzing faces.
Right. Yeah, no, it's amazing stuff. If you were to leave our listeners like with two things to apply,
yes,
what would those be?
Number one is take a second and just think, are their eyebrows high or low? And then the 3 shapes that I taught you earlier. And the reason I say that is if you don't even have to get it right, but if you just look at someone, you think, are their eyebrows high or low and what shape? That's going to give you a few seconds of eye contact with a person to build rapport. And then because we showed the lip one today, just think if they have a thinner upper lip, they want to keep a stiff upper lip, which means don't ask a lot of personal questions right away. So those 2 things will tell you enough to be dangerous with people and to help you build connection. So kind of a parting, I'm going to tell 2 things. One is there's 4 basic human needs: physical safety, emotional safety, people want to feel seen and heard, and people want to feel connected. Well, the seen and heard and the connected, you can learn by learning to decode people's facial features. And then I like to end with a story so people can understand it. And you actually kind of reminded me of this earlier. So I went to a wedding in Jekyll Island, which is Florida Georgia line, and our server was filling up our wine glasses, and I noticed he was in kind of a bad mood, but his name tag said Hungarian. Well, since I'd been to Budapest, I had already had those phrases stored in my phone. So when he came over to fill up my wine glass, I said Kosinome. He goes, "What?" I said, "Well, I just want to say thank you for taking care of us. I saw your name badge said Hungarian." He's like, "You speak Hungarian?" And we talked for 2 minutes about my experiences in Budapest, how long he's been there. For the rest of the night, not only was my wine glass never empty, neither were the 3 other tables that he took care of, because we took 2 seconds or 2 minutes
Right.
to make him feel seen and heard instead of ignored by everyone else. And that's what the power that everybody has. That's the best reason to learn this skill. If you get some perk out of it, great. If you just make people feel seen and heard, look, depression rates are through the roof. People don't know where they belong. Most people feel like a cog in the machine, not a person.
Yeah.
If you can take the time to literally give people your time and attention, every successful CEO or politician, the common theme that you hear is, I felt like I was the only person in the room with them. And now the listeners have the ability to do that and create that situation for other people. So,
Right. I love that. Man, Brian, you've dropped a ton of wisdom on us. Make sure you're watching this. Make sure you take a moment real quick, go out to Instagram and follow my good friend Brian here at Subtle Skills. So just all one word, right? No,
yep,
no
all one
dots or
word.
dashes.
Yeah, and I'll pop up I got a QR code here somewhere. Let me see if
Yeah,
I can find it.
100%. Scan this QR code, jump
Yeah.
on, get his cheat sheet, get everything, buy his deck of cards, like grab that stuff, and we'll put the links down in the descriptions and everything like that as well for those. So we'll make
Yeah.
sure that those are there. But yeah, by all means, scan his QR code. He's got. I mean, if you
Cheat
want to
sheets. Yeah, you
cheat
can
sheets, all of it.
follow, you can learn. Yeah.
I mean, stay connected. I mean, that's the reason why we're bringing folks like you on Be Growth Driven, is because we want people to get connected with other good people,
Mhm.
and that kind of brings me to a final question that I got for you here real quick.
Sure.
What does being growth driven mean to you?
So everything you ever read is when you stop growing is when you start dying. And so the being growth driven is, what are you constantly stretching for? What are you trying to improve upon? What are you doing every day to make your life just that smaller percentage better? And some days it doesn't have to top the preceding day, but are you doing something to grow in some form or fashion? So instead of just turning on a Netflix series, are you having listen to an audible, listen to a podcast?
Right.
You know, if you can't make it to the gym, do 10 push-ups. You know, do something to improve your life in some form or fashion, or focus on helping someone else for one time that day if you get into a mental funk. Because like I said, funk, I think I said it right, but
Yeah.
I started overthinking it in my head. So just in case, mental funk. But when you want to grow, sometimes when we hit those plateaus, it's by helping someone else that we grow at the exact same time.
Right. We learn, yeah, we learn something, right?
Yeah.
So we figure
Teaching is
something
learning
out.
twice.
We
Yeah.
think we know it, but then we help somebody, we teach it, or help somebody through it. And yeah, by all means, man, I love that.
Yeah.
Brian, I appreciate you. Thank you for jumping on, sharing your wisdom with our audience today. And definitely have you on again, and we'll go deeper on
Oh,
something.
absolutely.
So we'd love to hear in the comments, like as you guys are watching this, we'd love to hear in the comments like what you took away from this, what you'd like to learn more about, and we'll get Brian on there. And by all means, scan his link, get on there, get connected with him. He's a remarkable individual to be connected with, and somebody that'll change your life. So Brian, I appreciate you, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me
All
again.
right.
All right.
Until next time, join us again next week. Be Growth Driven. We'll have another fine episode, another remarkable guest on our show. And again, Brian, thank you for your time today.
Thanks a lot.
Till next time, be great, because nothing else pays.